In 2023, New Zealand lost more citizens than it gained for the first time in decades. Not during a war, not during a natural disaster, during what the government called a recovery. Over 80,000 people left. Most of them went to Australia. They weren't refugees. They were nurses, teachers, engineers, electricians, people with jobs, people who spoke the language, people who loved the mountains and the beaches and the idea of New Zealand. And they left anyway. This isn't a story about brain drain. It's a story about what happens when the math of living somewhere stops making sense. And it's happening faster than almost anyone predicted. Here's what makes this strange. New Zealand spent the last 20 years marketing itself as paradise, clean, green, safe, egalitarian, a place where you could raise kids and own a home and live a balanced life, the kind of country people dream about moving to. And for a while, that story held up. Immigration was strong, the economy grew, wages rose, slowly, but they rose. But something broke in the last 5 years, and it wasn't a single policy or a single event. It was the slow realization that the cost of being here had quietly become impossible. Let's talk about housing first, because that's where the insanity starts. The median house price in New Zealand hit 950,000 New Zealand dollars in 2021. That's around 570,000 US dollars. For a country with a median household income of about 107,000 New Zealand dollars a year. Do that math. That's a house price to income ratio of nearly 9-to-1. In most developed countries, anything above 5 is considered unaffordable. New Zealand blew past that threshold years ago. Auckland, the largest city, is worse. Median house price? Over $1 million. And these aren't mansions. They're modest 3-bedroom homes, often damp, often poorly insulated, sometimes with mold problems. Young professionals were told to save, be patient, build equity. But the gap kept widening. Every year they saved, prices rose faster. The down payment moved further away. So people gave up. Not loudly, not dramatically. They just started looking at job postings in Melbourne and Sydney. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. A registered nurse in New Zealand earns about 65,000 New Zealand dollars a year. In Australia, the same nurse earns 85,000 Australian dollars. That's about 92,000 New Zealand dollars, 40% more for the same job. Sometimes better conditions, often shorter shifts. Teachers face the same gap. Electricians, software developers, police officers. And Australia is a 3-hour flight away. Same language, similar culture, no visa required for New Zealand citizens. You can move on a Tuesday and start work on a Monday. It's not even a hard choice anymore. But housing and wages don't tell the whole story. New Zealand is expensive in ways that don't make sense. Groceries cost more than in Australia, even though Australia grows much of the same food. A block of cheese that costs 5 Australian dollars in Sydney costs 9 New Zealand dollars in Wellington. Petrol is heavily taxed. Electricity is among the most expensive in the developed world, despite the country generating 80% of its power from renewables. Cars are expensive. Electronics are expensive. Going out to dinner is expensive. The explanation people are given is that New Zealand is isolated. Shipping costs, small market, but the numbers don't quite add up. Monopolies control supermarkets. Duopolies control building supplies. Competition is weak and prices stay high. People began to feel trapped in an economy that extracted more and gave back less every year. COVID made it worse, but not in the way you'd expect. New Zealand locked down hard. It worked. The country had very few deaths. The government was praised internationally. But the lockdowns crushed small businesses. Tourism disappeared. And then, when borders reopened, inflation spiked. Interest rates rose. Mortgage payments doubled for some families. Meanwhile, the government had spent billions on COVID relief. The bill was coming due. Taxes didn't go down. Services didn't improve. The healthcare system was under strain. Emergency rooms had 6-hour waits. Ambulances were delayed. The deal people thought they had, the trade-off of high costs for high quality of life, started to feel like a scam. By 2023, the exodus accelerated. Entire hospital departments lost staff to Australia. Schools struggled to fill teaching positions. Construction projects stalled because there weren't enough tradespeople. The government tried to spin it. They called it a temporary blip, a post-pandemic adjustment. They launched campaigns to attract immigrants to fill the gaps. But immigrants were arriving and leaving within 2 years. They'd come for the lifestyle, they'd leave when they saw the rent and the wages and the grocery bills. Some New Zealanders who left felt guilty. They'd say things like, "I still love New Zealand, I just can't afford to live there anymore," as if leaving was a betrayal instead of a rational decision. Here's the absurd part. New Zealand's government kept promoting immigration. They needed workers. But the same structural problems that pushed Kiwis out pushed immigrants out too. It became a churn. People arrived, people left. The population was technically stable, but it was hollow. The people leaving were established, educated, experienced. The people arriving were starting from scratch. The country was losing institutional knowledge faster than it could rebuild it. So what happened? How does a rich, stable, peaceful democracy price out its own citizens? Part of it is housing policy. New Zealand never built enough homes. Local councils blocked development. Zoning laws were rigid. NIMBYism was rampant. Investors bought properties as assets, not homes. Part of it is wage stagnation. Productivity growth was weak. Unions had limited power. Businesses kept costs low by keeping wages low. Part of it is geography. New Zealand is isolated. It's small. It doesn't have the scale of Australia or the dynamism of the US, but it kept comparing itself to those places without the economic engine to match. And part of it is political failure. Successive governments promised affordability and never delivered. They talked about solutions and implemented half measures. The crisis was visible for years, and no one acted fast enough. Now, New Zealand faces a spiral. People leave, tax revenue falls, services decline, more people leave. Australia benefits. It gets skilled workers who are already trained, already speak English, already understand the culture. No immigration bureaucracy, no integration costs, just talent arriving ready to work. It's subsidizing Australia's workforce. This story isn't just about New Zealand. It's about what happens when a country becomes unaffordable for the people who built it. You see echoes of this in Canada, in the UK, in parts of the US, places where housing prices exploded, wages stagnated, and young people started asking, why are we staying? The difference is that in New Zealand, leaving is easy. There's a place right next door that speaks your language, wants your skills, and pays you more. It's a controlled experiment in what happens when the math stops making sense. New Zealand still markets itself as paradise. The tourism ads still show mountains and beaches and happy families. The immigration campaigns still promise quality of life. But the people who grew up there, who loved it, who wanted to stay, are doing the math and walking away. And the question no one wants to ask is this: if the people who know a place best choose to leave it, what does that say about the place? The exodus isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. And so far, no one has figured out how to stop it.